Hi, everybody. I am so excited for this panel. It is something I've been thinking about for a very long time, and I'm really glad that it's actually getting off the ground this year, the first panel of the year as well. So we're starting off really strong. If you don't know who I am, my name is Lily. I will be the moderator for this panel and the face behind Utopia State of Mind on the internet. We're going to be chatting with these fabulous authors who talk about YA, romance, and the transition from YA to romance. So next we're going to have our authors introduce themselves, and if you have any questions during the panel, please write them in the chat and I will keep an eye on them and try to get back to them. So let's just start off with author intros, and Sonora, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sonora Reyes. My YA books are The Lesbianas Guide to Catholic School and the Luis Ortega Survival Club. And my adult romance debut just came out this month. Oh, last month. Oh my God, it's February now. And that is The Broposal. Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Thank you. I don't know what else I should say. I like writing queer Mexican books.
So I'm Suzanne Park. I write both YA and adult books, and I debuted in 2020 in April. So it's been an interesting publishing journey. I know Lily has been very aware of my entire journey. We met very early on in it. And so, yeah, I've been writing. At the beginning, I was writing both YA and adult at the same time. And then the last two books were adult and adult releases without the YA at the same year. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Lily Vale. I write YA and adult books that feel like magic or that actually are magic. My last adult novel was Wrapped with a Bow, which is a Christmas small town grumpy sunshine rom-com. And my forthcoming novel is a YA coming out this July. It's a sapphic autumnal redemption quest coming of age called Hit Me With Your Best Charm.
Hi, I am Julian Winters. I write young adult and I guess adult. My young adult she's probably most known for are Running with Lions, Right Where I Left You, Prince of the Palisades, and my adult just came out last week. It's called I Think They Love You, and I just love writing queer, joyful stories that focus in on community and celebrating who we are.
Hi, I'm Adib Karam. I use he, him pronouns. I somehow immediately forgot the name of my own books. So I had to look if I have any of my books close to me. It turns out I've written YAs like Darius the Great Is Not Okay. And my first adult book, I'll Have What He's Having, came out at some point in the past. Last year. That sounds normal. That's great. Excuse my brain fart.
Well, perfect. I think what I want to start off first with is kind of the theme of today's panel, which is sort of about if everyone could tell us a story of how your most recent adult book came to be, and sort of when did you first have the beginnings of that idea or, the project? And specifically for me, and I'm sure other people are also interested, how was the behind the scenes publication process like for that? I'm sure everyone has kind of different starting points and different inspiration points. So I think it would be really useful to chat. Sonora, do you want to start?
Sure. So The Broposal was actually the second book I ever wrote. I wrote it back in like 2019, unfortunately during the current guy's last term, for the reason of like trying to cope with all that stuff. Especially with like, immigration specifically. And I've always been like a fan of the movie The Proposal and like rom-coms in general. But it always really kind of annoyed me that like most of the green card romances I ever heard about were like with either Canadian or European immigrants. And like let's be real, like that's not who you think about when they're saying they want mass deportation. That's not who they're talking about. So I was like, well, why is that like that? And so I was just like, if I'm gonna write a green card romance, I want it to represent people like me or people like my community who would actually be more like in that fight daily. And it was like kind of like I wanted to kind of cope and give like happy ending to all of that. And I'm so sorry if you hear my dog crying outside the door. He literally was just crying to be let out before this. And I told him, I'll let you out, but you can't come back in for the next hour. And he didn't listen. So he's crying. I'm so sorry. Um, was I also supposed to answer the second part 2 of the question of the like publishing process of that?
About the publishing, like behind the scenes.
Okay, yeah. So, I had written this book before I ever had like any like an agent or a book deal or anything like that. I wrote it literally just like a couple months after I wrote the first one. The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholics was the first one I wrote. So for me, it wasn't really like an intentional, I'm going to pivot from like being a young adult author into like being an adult author because I wasn't an author yet at all. So it was just kind of like stories that I felt like I wanted to write. I was writing them. But then the one that got me published first happened to be young adult. And then that one happened really, really fast, like really, really fast process. Like I got an agent and book deal quicker than I expected. And then this one took quite a bit longer. Like it needed a lot more revision. I needed to really like rewrite it a few times for it to be where it is now. And it took a lot longer to get where it needed to be, but we did eventually get it ready for submission, and we put it out. And eventually I did have kind of like a weird process. I don't know how much this would make sense to like people not in like publishing, but I did kind of get like an offer based on it was supposed to be a revise and resubmit, but we had another offer from like another editor. So I'm sorry about my dog. So we told them like we can't do a revise and resubmit, so we'll write an edit letter as if this is the revision we're going to do. So I wrote myself an edit letter, rewrote like the first chapter and sent them that instead of the revise and resubmit, and they offered on that. So we ended up getting the book deal based on like an idea of what it was going to look like. So it was like way more work after the book deal too. So it was like that book like went through a lot from like step 1 to step 100, which is before getting published. So yeah, it was a very, very different process from my first one.
Sorry, like triple muted myself. I don't even know how that's possible, but I did it. So my books, my adult books usually focus on workplace comedies with romance. And for this particular book, let me see, which way am I pointing? One Last Word. It's about a woman who develops an app that lets you say whatever you want to whomever you want when you pass away. And when another person with the same name passes away, then all of her messages were released. And then she has to deal with the aftermath from that. So she sends messages to her overbearing parents, her ex-best friend, and her unrequited crush from high school. So, and has to wrap up and deal with and confront all those people and explain what happened. So that was inspired by a lot of TV I was binging during the pandemic. And so To All the Boys I've loved before, the books, and also the show, I was like, what would be a funny adult version of that? And then I was also watching a lot of Shark Tank. I don't know why, but I thought that was kind of a good way to binge during the pandemic. And so between those two things, it really helped shape how this novel came to be. As far as behind the scenes, I guess this particular book was an interesting one because, we had a great cover. I love this cover. And then my editor left, and then her replacement then left. And then I had the new editor. So I had like 3 editors on this book within the last 6 months of this book, heading up to release. So there's a lot of change happening that I wasn't used to because the other books had the same editors or just a less of a chaotic transition. But that being said, I really enjoyed how this book was released because this is the first time, because again, I released in the pandemic, that most of this book was just in person, and I had supplemental virtual events too, but it felt like a normal book release. And I wanted deliberately to tour cities and places that I don't think my books would normally go to. So I was in the South and just going to, random cities. And it was actually a lot of fun to try something like that, because I was thinking, like, I wonder who would be interested in my book. And it has, I think, wider appeal than I think most currently the other books had been, the target market had been scoped as. So I feel like I learned a lot on this particular book release.
So, Wrapped with a Bow came about because, as anyone who's familiar with my work, I know Lily has been with me since Small Town Hearts back in 2019, which was my debut novel, which was a YA that was it was post high school, so the characters were like 19 years old, so it was kind of in that limbo space in between, not quite new adult, but the publisher still kind of marketed it as YA. And that was a story about a tourist town in Maine. And as I said, anyone who knows my work knows that I love writing books that are love letters to the setting. So Wrapped with a Bow is about a small mountain Poconos town where they are famous for a Christmas movie that came out 50 years ago. And currently they are about to they're going to revamp it. And so the town is super, super like into this. They are like dining out on this like endlessly because it's their claim to fame. And that was something that I really love exploring, the way that tourist towns are through the eyes of a local rather than someone new to the town. And I was really interested in doing something that was like Christmas set. And I pitched this to my editor and my agent as a follow-up to my debut adult novels, The Shoddy Setup. And they were like, yeah, we like this, but like, what else do you have? So we talked about different ideas. I pitched different things. And then we ultimately ended up settling on a Hollywood set fake dating rom-com called The Decoy Girlfriend. And that was a love letter to, Hollywood and fake dating, and more specifically, the neighborhood of Los Feliz, which is just beautiful and I love it. And I wasn't really expecting that I would get a chance to write my Christmas set rom-com. And then when it came time for the book after The Decoy Girlfriend, I was getting ready to pitch new ideas. I had a bunch of stuff going and I was thinking, okay, what am I going to offer? And then my editor was like, hey, remember that rom-com you were talking about? That one set in the Poconos town? Like, do you still feel like writing that? And I was like, yes, like emphatic 100%, 110% yes. So that's how that book came about. It was the book I wasn't sure I was going to get to write, but very luckily I did.
So I think they love you. I think that's on the screen there. It's kind of interesting. I've grew up loving rom-coms. That is what I did on the weekends. I am old enough that I remember going to Blockbuster Video every Saturday, Friday night, and picking up the new Sandra Bullock, the new Julia Roberts, whatever was out there to go home and watch. So I was obsessed with rom-coms, but I could never really like see myself getting that, even though I was like, I think at my very young 11-year-old, 12-year-old age, think that Hugh Grant would love me dearly. I just think I couldn't see it for myself. And so when it came time to sit down and actually write my own rom-com, I just wanted to draw on all those inspirations, all those things I really wanted for myself when I watched those movies, and kind of like throwing them into a book, seeing how it worked. I am a huge fan of fake dating. You could sell it to me every single time. I don't care if I know exactly how it's going to start and exactly how it's going to end. Take me on the journey every time. So I wanted to take a shot at doing that for myself and seeing, oh, well, maybe can you write a fake dating story? And it turned out to be so much fun. So I was really grateful that I went down that path, but I didn't know how to really tie it in to make it feel strong enough. And lo and behold, 2019 comes around. I seem to have found this obsession with an album called Reputation. I don't know what happened. But there was a song that you may have heard of called New Year's Day. And I kept listening to that over and over while I was trying to plan out what like my next novels were going to be. And there was a couple of lines in there that said, oh, this needs to be a second chance romance. And so that's kind of how all that came about with writing. I Think They Love You is just that chance for me to kind of write the love story I always wanted for myself when I was growing up. Behind the scenes, though, it took a lot longer than I thought. By the time I sat down to draft I Think They Love You, I think I had written for probably 5 YAs by then. So my head, every time I go to sit down and write a story, is in a teenager's brain. And so every time I was writing, I was like, oh, this is feeling very YA. This is very YA. And my agent would point it out. Hey, instead of saying boy, you can say man now, right? You can do these things. Like, oh, what a concept. So drafting I Think They Love You took a lot longer than any of my other books because we just kept going through revisions. And taking ideas and either shaping them or taking them out and replacing them with something different. But it was actually one of the best experiences for me to kind of learn that despite how far you are in your writing journey, there's always a chance to learn something new. There's always a chance to kind of adapt your style. There's always a chance to take a path that you hadn't taken before to create something. So yeah, and then fortunately went out, sold it to a fantastic editor. My editor Vicky is unbelievable. She made every step of the journey after that first draft experience so much fun, and yeah, I'm just so grateful for that.
Picture it, my apartment, 2020. A young man, not that young anymore, told himself that 2020 would be his year of dating, getting out in the world, and instead, there was a global pandemic instead. I was that man. And so I ended up reading a lot of romances instead because I was depressed. I don't know if anyone else remembers being really depressed when you couldn't go outside. And after reading so many romances, I always loved romances growing up, but hadn't delved deeply into the genre in a while. And to see how many more queer stories and stories by people of color were available was very exciting. But I'm always interested in stories about gay Iranians, and I had a hard time finding any in the traditionally published space, especially ones that I could access at my library. And I was like, maybe I should write that. And separately and concurrently with this kind of bubbling idea, I helped 2 different friends move house, one after the other. And I'm not young enough to do that anymore. And so my body was destroyed, and I got one of those oven-baked pizzas and a bottle of rosé and maybe finished both things by myself in one night, as one did during the pandemic. And was like, I've always wanted to go to Italy. Surely by 2022, the pandemic will be over. And so I booked a trip to Italy and then woke up the next day and was like, I need to find a way to make this a tax write-off. So those 2 things kind of combined into me leaping into the world of adult romance. I was really inspired by romances about close-knit families or close-knit friend groups where each member of them kind of gets their own chance at love, like Alexis Daria's Primas of Power, or Helen Huang's trilogy, or Adriana Herrera's Dreamers series. And so I wanted to do that, but about gay Iranians approaching their 40s, because that's where I was in life as well. As far as the publication journey, it's very interesting because I had written at that point several YAs and a couple picture books for a school and library in imprint. And to make the shift to commercial romance, I think there were 2 really big differences. One is just the time scale. Everything in YA world had to be done a year out so that it could get to gatekeepers, so that it could get to awards committees. That was the path for those books. And in romance, it's direct to consumer. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, release is still a year away. Are you mad at me that we're not done? And they're like, no, calm down, Adib. We are just, the calendar is different. So I had to get used to that. And the other thing was, I think romance as a genre tends to be populated by numbers people and by data people. And so I was constantly being given information that I was not used to being given in Kidlit space, like my print runs and like my buy-in numbers from different accounts. And I had never seen anything like this before. And I had to email my agent and be like, are these good or bad? Also, can you tell them to only give them to you and not give them to me from now on? And she's like, they're good, don't worry. And yes, I will tell them to skip you next time. And I was like, great, heard. Because I can't do anything about numbers. I'm just gonna sit and write my little gay books. So yeah, I don't know, but it's been fun. Oh, I feel like everyone showed a picture of the book. I'll show a picture of my book. This is my book. It's got little flaps because I was doing reading from it. Okay, I'm done now.
My next question is kind of a little bit, Julian mentioned this a little bit before about kind of things and sort of perspectives that you would change, when writing this different age group. And so that's my next question, sort of what is, one aspect or maybe what's an aspect that you are excited to explore, in this different age group? And because of that, maybe how did you approach maybe your character development or character states? I mean, the characters are at different points than they would be if they were in a YA book. So like, how do you approach that? Julian, do you want to start? Because you were chatting about it before.
Absolutely not. But thank you for the offer. I'm just kidding. What was I excited about writing as an adult? I don't know. I think at least in like my own little sphere, it's always felt like once you hit a certain age, you have everything together. You have the career, where you're going, whether you're going to be in like a long-term relationship marriage situation or if you're going to be this. And I, in my 20s, which is the age that my characters are in the book, was just being messy the whole time. I was just making mistake after mistake after mistake and thought I was doing it wrong. And it wasn't until my 30s where I realized like, oh, actually, that's how you spend your 20s. Well, thank you for telling me that. Instead of when I was 18, you told me I had to have my shit together because I didn't. So I was really excited about being able to write in that stage of life, how you can still not have a clue what is going on and what you're supposed to be doing it, but with more adult situations, especially in, figuring out career and have you been going the right path the whole time or you've just been wasting your time. And then in relationships too, because again, you're just so messy at that age. No one really has it figured out, even though they make you feel like, okay, this is the time you're supposed to be feeling like you're going to find the one. And sometimes the one came and went and you weren't the person you needed to be at the time for that person and they weren't the person that they needed to be for you. That does not mean it wasn't meant to be. So I was really excited about writing that second chance romance situation where people sometimes come in our lives and it all goes wrong, but that doesn't make us horrible people and it doesn't mean that we can't try again in some different phase, whether it's romance, platonic, or whatever.
I feel like I had, oh, sorry. Were you?
No, you go first.
Like saw you unmute. Yeah, I feel like I had a similar thought with writing, with going into adult, especially with like younger adults. Like in the proposal, my two main characters, I think they're 23. They're still pretty young. And I actually I thought going into adult that I needed to like make my voice, like my character voice, like so much more mature and so much more like grown sounding. And so I really, really struggled with like finding the balance of doing that and making it feel authentic to like my voice. Spoiler alert, I couldn't do it. Like I failed. And so it wasn't until I finally was like given permission by the editor who eventually took me on, because so I had mentioned before that it was supposed to be like a revise and resubmit. The thing they mostly wanted me to revise for was the voice, which was interesting because most of my rejections that I had gotten up to that point had said that it read too young, that it read like too much like young adult. But this editor said it feels like you're holding back like your natural, like the way that you want your characters to sound, like the way that would be natural for you to write, because she had read the Lesbianas Guide to Catholic School. And so she's like, I know what you can do. And I feel like you're not fully doing it in this one. And so she basically gave me permission to like, let them sound young. They're 23. Like they're young. Like they don't have to sound like they're like, I don't know. So basically she was like, no, that's actually like a really silly thing to expect from people in their 20s to sound so much more mature than people in their teens, because like I still talk like how I talked as a teenager. Like I don't really sound all that different. Like I don't sound all that more mature. Like maybe I have my ideas more formed, but like the actual words that I use, I'm not like speaking, I'm not using so much more vocabulary, obviously, like, and right now I can't even think of what words are, but you know what I mean? So that kind of gave me permission to be like, okay, adult isn't actually that different in the voice. At least for my character and for like new adult, like which my book was. But as far as like the themes, like that's kind of what is different, because you're like in a new stage of life. And like Julian said, like they're in their early 20s, and so they're kind of in that phase where like a lot of people, like, you know, there's that phase where like some of your friends are like married with kids already, and then some of your friends are like, you know, partying every day, and you know, or living in the dorms or living with their parents, and it's like just two completely different worlds at the same age. And so I always felt like that was something that was like a big experience for people in their 20s, especially for me. And so I like kind of was like excited to explore that a little bit. It really unlocked something for me to be able to do it in a way that felt like I wasn't trying to sound too mature, especially when the characters are like neurodivergent. I feel like we already get told that we sound too young. And so it's just kind of like, maybe it's okay if they sound neurodivergent and some people think that makes them sound young, like whatever, it's fine. So yeah. I don't know if that even answered your question. Okay.
My favorite thing about writing adult, especially picking characters that were essentially my age, they ended up having to be like 2 years younger than me, because like they were my age when I was writing them, but books take a while to come out. And it was great just being able to pick things that I liked, and have my characters like them and not have to explain like their dad likes this music. It's like, no, they grew up listening to Cher's Believe when it was on repeat in high school, and therefore they're still obsessed with Cher. Or they saw Lord of the Rings when it came out in theaters, or they were alive when 9/11 happened and it was a formative event for them. It was just really fun to talk about like things that affected me and people my age, and have them be affecting my characters with no hand waving necessary. That was really fun. Also, no one else has said it. I'm going to say it. It's fun to write about consenting adults boning. Like it just is. There, I said it.
Well, like some of the other authors mentioned, you know, as you're a YA character, like you don't have everything put together and you think you're supposed to. And then I discovered that when writing my adult novels that, you know what, my adult characters really don't have it all figured out either. So I really like reject the idea that a coming of age story can only be like restricted to YA as a genre. Like sorry, not a genre, but like as age group. I 100% think that all of my adult books have had like a coming of age arc as well. And I really like enjoy that you can show characters who don't have it all figured out and they're messy, they're making mistakes, and through their romantic arc with the other character, they're really kind of figuring it out together, like who they are as individuals and as a couple. And what I really enjoy about like writing in the adult space is that you have a lot more flexibility with the tropes. Like there's no end to the amazing creative things that you can do with tropes in YA. But if you wanted to write like, you know, certain ones, like maybe secret baby or single dad or age gap romance, like obviously these are a lot more difficult to navigate in the YA space. So if I wanted to sit down tomorrow and write, you know, an age gap, single dad kind of romance in YA, like that's a no-go. But if I wanted to write that in adult, like suddenly I have a whole bunch of options open to me. And like Suzanne mentioned that a lot of her books focus in like workplace romance. Like again, that's something that you could do in YA, but I feel like in the adult space, you have a lot more like flexibility to explore different like avenues with that. So that's something that I really enjoyed, is just, you know, the greater independence that adult characters have, but they don't have to depend on, you know, financial support from parents, or, you know, someone driving them to wherever they need to go. Like they need to go to the mall, like they can take themselves, they can get in the car and go. They want to take a day off work, they can just call in sick and do what they want. Like you don't have to ask permission to do what you want to do, an adult. And I really enjoy that.
I agree with everyone here. I don't have much else to say. I'm glad I didn't go first like Julian. um, one thing I like exploring in all my books is self-discovery. And one thing that I do in my YA books is I have a lot of firsts included. So first experiences in relationships, things that happen to them that are that affect their future, things like that, where they have to start serious decision making. And I think that's one thing that I like to see is the trying things out and succeeding or failing and learning from that. My adult books, they feature people in their 20s and 30s. So I think the more books I wrote, they tended to get older. I don't know if that was by design or just because I wanted to start writing people closer to my age, but I write about, in the adult space, I write about people trying to figure out how to be an adult because it's hard. I was just talking about this with my husband today. I was like, I feel like life is harder now than it was 10 years ago. And I don't know why. We were like, why is it harder? It should have been easier, but I thought that's how life is supposed to be. And I think that because these things happen, it's these aha moments that I start going, okay, there's a nugget there that I can start using as a foundation for my next book. I also like to write about, in the adult space, how goalposts keep moving. So when you think you've accomplished something else moves, and then you feel like you have to get that next thing. And I feel like that happens to everybody. And I like to write about that, both in career, in romance, in all the things you're experiencing that seems to be a common occurrence for everyone, and everyone can relate to that. I do like to write about workplace comedies. I think I have a lot of stories still in me. People, I worked in a lot of male-dominated workplaces, so a lot of these, the things that I write about tend to show up in my story. So, and I think finally, it's just the one difference that I have to say, aside from voice and characters' experiences, is that in the YA space, I've been able to just do things that are a little bit more absurd and silly. So I will say that's a little bit different. I don't find myself doing that as much in the adult space, but in the YA space, like my debut book was about the zombie survival challenge, and there's AI in it. The second book was about a girl going to a digital detox camp in Iowa. Third book of my holiday release is about two feuding Asian American food court families in a mall. So they just have almost sillier themes that come. I guess they converge and have like more serious underlying themes, but that's the premises I find I have a little bit more fun with. That's just my own personal preference.
Yeah, I love what everyone was saying about like the self-discovery and that kind of journey not really ever ending. I feel like every next decade you hear like, oh, the next decade, that's when everyone like gets their stuff together. And then you like get there and it's like the next one, like, 30s are the next 20s or whatever. And it's like, well, okay. I want to ask now about some questions that kind of delve a little bit deeper into specific books. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat. I first want to talk about fake relationships, because we've already kind of discussed that a little bit, and I think They Love You and The Proposal, both of your books have this like fake relationship setup, but also both of that also have such rich history between the two, like, relationship question mark people, right? Because that's part of the dynamic. And so I would love to know, how do you approach the line between blurring fiction and reality in a fake relationship, and also with this kind of extra history behind your characters. So Nora, do you want to start? Because I don't want to pick Julian first.
Sure. I think it's so funny because actually me and Julian recently did a live where we were talking about the fake relationship trope, and we were just talking about like all the tropes really, but when it comes to like history and like childhood or even just like any kind of history that you have with a person, I am so weak for history in romance when it comes to like especially childhood best friends. I feel like there's something so special about like just when you know someone so well, um and you know all the things that they might consider to be like flaws, and then like still love them, and they still love each other, right? Or still like have the capacity to fall in love potentially, maybe. And I think that that's what makes it so fun, is because they're finally entering into a space where like they've never known each other in this way. And so they don't actually know anymore what the other person might be thinking or feeling, even if they think they do, or they are so used to being able to just like kind of be on the same page and guess and like be right about the other person and where they're at and their headspace and everything. But this is like uncharted territory for the first time. And I find that so fun and angsty too, because it's like, is it just me? Like, or do they feel the same way? And then there's like kind of the stakes of like, you already value this relationship with this person so much that like, if this like fake dating turns out to be like less fake than I thought, like does that sabotage what we had before? Like, do we have to, there's so much that goes into it. And I really love angst, like, and pining, and just like not, I don't know, I'm a fan of that kind of thing. So I had a lot of fun with that aspect of the fake dating, and the like what's real, what's not real, but like it's always been real, and it's just like, what is this, like what is this person, how is this other person experiencing it? I really had fun with that.
So having that rich history, I feel like it's a little bit of a cheat code when you want to write a fake relationship, because now we don't have to spend 2.5 chapters these two characters trying to figure out, oh, well, what's your favorite color? How do you like your tea or your coffee? All these different things. It's kind of like I already know these things, but also adding in that layer of when that character's changed from what you think you've known. So you're like, oh, you obviously like it this way. And the other character's like, actually, I don't. Because it really tests. I love that tension of being able to test each other's knowledge on the person, because you feel like if in your relationship with somebody, especially when it's a fake relationship, you have to know all of these key intimate details about someone. And when you don't and get called out on it or get caught in it, oh, I just love it so much. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. I feel, to have that kind of built-in rich history, especially when you can kind of take what the reader already thinks is going to happen, already thinks that they know, and surprise them. I enjoyed that so much. Blurring the lines of reality and this fictional relationship that he created was also a lot of fun to me, because it's not only that tension between the characters that, in their banter and the way they talk, but it's also that like romantic tension and that physical and sexual tension that you get to really amplify, because it's like, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to hold your hand, but how do I hold your hand? And what does that look like? And also, should I kiss you? Because obviously this is what we're supposed to celebrate, and everybody expects us to kiss, but when we kiss, oh my gosh, why does it feel like this? So I just love those moments so much. I love it in any romance, but I think adding that additional layer of, okay, so we just kissed, but did you feel what I just felt, kind of thing? Love it so much. So I had so much fun with that. And then being able to dive into those more intimate moments, which I know, Sonora, you have in your book also, where both characters are like, oh gosh, we have to be vulnerable with each other, but how vulnerable are we allowed to be now that we've seen this other side that we're showing everyone? So yeah, it's a ton of fun. Highly recommend, everyone.
Yeah, and I also love the way both of your books examine or like use flashbacks and use sort of memories and kind of what Julian was saying, this juxtaposition between memory and kind of what is now happening, the distance between a memory and like the current moment and how that impacts it. Um, so they naturally merge into being very good conversation partners. Uh, Next, I want to chat about meet cutes. Meet cutes are like a romance trope that is so iconic. And Wrapped with a Bow and I'll Have What He's Having have some pretty fun and slightly chaotic meet cute moments. And I wanted to know, how did you both approach this kind of very first meeting between your characters, and sort of was their first meeting or interaction always this? Did it go through edits? Like, was it always sort of ironed out like that in your mind? Lily, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start us off. So in Wrapped with a Bow, it's about a middle grade fantasy author from New York City who inherits a house in the Poconos, and he doesn't really want to be there. He's haunted by memories of a Christmas he spent here long, long ago. And he flies down and he is basically just trying to familiarize himself with the house. He lets himself in. It's really early in the morning and he's kind of making a bit of noise, turning on the lights. And because of the early hour, the girl across the street, who happens to be a film liaison for the town and who is in charge of basically making sure that they have the filming permission to film at that house, which was such a cornerstone of the original movie that was produced there 50 years ago. She wakes up early and she is super protective of that house. And she's imagining like all sorts of horrible things happening. Like a burglar is getting in there. He's stealing like all the valuables inside the house. And she's imagining all the ways it could go wrong for her, like personally and professionally, because she also, in addition to needing to secure the filming permission for that house from the new owner so the production can go ahead, she also has a very personal connection in that the woman who used to own it was sort of her best friend, even though she was much, much older. The main character, Alicia, would spend days after school there, weekends there. They would bond over their love of romance novels, like any kind of romance novel, like contemporary, mass market, historical. Alicia would just devour everything from there. And so the idea that there's someone who has broken into the house and making himself at home and making a ruckus, like really does not settle right with her. So she storms over. She's in her pajamas and they have like a little Christmas kind of motif on them. And she has little bunny slippers on and she marches her way across the snow. She grabs her mother's lawn ornament, which is like a 2-3 foot plastic candy cane. She grabs it as her weapon and she's imagining how she's going to like hit this guy over the head and like to kind of like take him by surprise and demand to know what he's doing there. So she storms in and she actually like raises this ornament over her head and she's about to whack him with it when he turns around and in her surprise, because he's incredibly good looking, as one does, she accidentally brings the candy cane down on her own knee, injures herself and falls over. And there could literally be nothing more humiliating than that for her, especially dressed the way she is. Like she's embarrassed because he's looking very like sophisticated and polished, like very New York City. And here she is in her embarrassing, like childish pajamas and her bunny slippers and her hair is all messy and she's just completely and thoroughly embarrassed. And I thought that this was a really perfect way of kind of showcasing the dynamic between the two of them. He is very reserved, very frosty. He basically doesn't really bat an eye at her antics, even though like she is kind of like frothing at the mouth about this whole situation and trying to backtrack and get her way out of it, because she very quickly realizes he's not a burglar, he is the new owner, and she basically has made a horrible first impression on him. And oh my gosh, how is she going to get his permission to film at the house now? He's really not inclined to give it to her at this point. And so he's reserved, he's frosty, and like she is very much like jumps in, impulsive, reckless, does things without thinking. She's very good at talking herself into things and not so good at talking herself out. And I felt like the meet cute was like the perfect way to really show the reader like who these two characters are and like why they're complete opposites and why they're really not going to work. Except, of course, it's a rom-com novel, so they do. But yeah, I think that was probably my favorite meet cute ever. And like, I think that first chapter, like the banter, the dynamics is just like, I just loved writing every minute of it. I've never written characters who are that different before. So doing like the grumpy sunshine, opposites attract, especially when you get off on such like the wrong foot with each other and you make a terrible first impression, how do you come back from that, was like catnip for me.
Um, I'll Have What He's Having is dedicated to my agent Molly, and the dedication specifically says, "Thank you for letting me borrow your backstory." My agent's name is Molly O'Neill, and when she first moved to New York in her 20s, that was also the name of the New York Times's like head food writer, also called Molly O'Neill, who also had like a line of cookbooks, was extremely well known, and Molly was constantly getting mail and free books that were intended to be going to the Molly O'Neill at the New York Times, and they just kept showing up at her little office at HarperCollins. However, being in her 20s, she had a friend that was a chef, and they decided to make use of this. So she would call and get reservations under her name. People would just assume it was a different Molly O'Neill, and she would take her chef friend with her, who could then sweet talk the chef at the restaurant into getting free food out of it. And I was like, okay, this is brilliant. Someday that needs to be a meet cute for a romance. And so I literally just lifted it whole cloth from her life and dropped it into I'll Have What He's Having, where Farzan uses his white person name to make a reservation. Anyone, and if you're an immigrant, you know, sometimes you just have to use the closest sounding white name to yours. The David, the sommelier at a wine bar, mistakes Farzan for a critic. They both accidentally think the other is flirting. They end up in bed. And because I like mistaken identity, but don't like when it goes on too long, they very quickly realize their mistake. And because they're mature, almost 40-year-old men, they're like, ha ha ha, well, the sex was good. Do you want to do that again? And it just went from there.
Yeah, I love how I did not know that. But that is amazing that's real. I want to now ask about In One Last Word, which it might be one of my favorite of your books. I don't even have my copy. My mom has it, so I don't even have anything to show. I was wondering if you could talk to us about Sarah's app and how you kind of continuously throughout your adult releases examine sexism within the tech industry, specifically in One Last Word.
So this one was, again, most of my books are grounded in some sort of reality of mine or somebody close to me that has told me their workplace horror stories. And I was like, hey, I'm going to include that in the book just to get some retribution here. So that particular one, you know, I've done a lot of research about, you know, people who have been in different industries and shut down, or people who have ideas but are kind of dismissed as worker bees, but not really the people who are leaders and contribute like in a visionary sort of way. And so I tend to write books about people who have potential in the workplace, but are overlooked and not given opportunities to have them shine. So in One Last Word, there is an app developer who creates the actual app that she knows, because she's just really smart and great at what she does, that this app can make the company money. But because it wasn't originating from one of the founders, or it wasn't an idea that they felt like was a big blockbuster, they passed over it, even though there was all this evidence that this could actually make the company a profit. So she just kind of says, like, you know, screw you guys, I'm just going to go off on my own, and then starts her own company. And, you know, just the fear of doing that, starting something entrepreneurial. There's a lot of people who want to do something like this, but are scared. And so I wanted to just show, you know, the reality of what that type of life is like, because it's not that glamorous. Actually, from everybody that's told me that they started their own thing, it's literally like late nights, you're sitting there on your own couch, there's like, you know, your garage is full of, you know, stuff that's used for packing and shipping, you know, that sort of thing. So I know that reality well. And so I've been so I like to explore people who have to go through a lot to shine on their own, but you're invested in the character, and at the end you kind of want to cheer her on because there's usually some sort of moment, this aha moment, where she perseveres and gets to confront the people who told her that she couldn't do it.
So I will ask one of the questions that we got. Anyone can feel free to answer or not. And it is, what, in your opinion, do you think is the worst trope in YA or the adult space? I don't even know
That sounds
what
like a
my
trick
answer
question to
would
get
be.
all of us canceled.
Yeah. We shouldn't yuck people's yums, but
I'll
agree.
do
I
it.
I agree. And so I'm going to put myself out there to get canceled. I don't think I have a least favorite, but I do have one that I often feel isn't done in a way that feels right to me. And I think enemies to lovers is really tough to do right, especially in adult and especially in workplaces, because so often enemies to lovers really feels like should have been reported to HR to lovers. And I feel like any enemies to lovers that doesn't address power dynamics in the relationship before they become lovers, and certainly doesn't examine the power dynamics after they become lovers, has failed fundamentally to do what's on the packaging. On the other hand, if they're like truly enemies, like especially in fantasy settings, and they're like, trying to kill each other, and then like, oh no, I can't kill you because you're hot, that's great. So I won't say it's like my least favorite. I just think sometimes it's done poorly.
I 100% agree with that. With the caveat that I do think every trope, I should say most tropes, because who knows? I should never, you never know. But I think most tropes can be written well, even if they're not for me. But yeah, I think for me, like I guess like a section of enemies to lovers that I just don't love is like the bully romance, especially when it's like a homophobic bully that then is only homophobic because they're secretly gay, and then they realize it, and then they're bullying the person that they like. I don't know. It doesn't do it for me. I can't. Also billionaire romance. I can't. It couldn't be me. I just can't. But like, you do you. But yeah, so
I feel like billionaire romance was a lot easier to get behind when there weren't actual billionaires actually trying to destroy the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like I feel like I with enemies to lovers or like billionaire romance or like anything that feels too like real life evil is hard to get behind. But if it feels like fantasy or like, like they're literally trying to kill each other, I like that more than if they're like one of them is slightly mean to each other, but it's like racist, or it's like, something where I'm like, unforgivable. No, but if you tried to kill me, but you're hot, that's fine. Like, that's fine. Like, I don't know. My priorities may be a little messed up, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
I just wanted to say that I see a lot of the time rivals to lovers and enemies to lovers get mixed up, and I wish there was just more clarity around that. So I kind of get annoyed when they mix it up, and then it becomes like the label of that book, and then it ends up confusing readers. And so that's one thing I just wanted to mention about that particular trope that bothers me.
Yeah, 100%. What Suzanne said. So in A Wrap to the Bow, the meet cute, the first meeting that I just talked about, because of that kind of hostile, combative meeting, like the book has got labeled as enemies to lovers. And then something that really, really bothers me about that is like the confusion around like enemies to lovers versus just dislike to like. Or like, the other tertiary tropes like rivals to lovers or what have you. It's like, it's not the same thing. And then you get one person calling it that. And then it kind of gets this like snowballing effect where everyone calls it that. And then before you know it, like you're suddenly getting like these reviews from people who are like, this is not enemies to lovers. Like they mildly disliked each other at best. And it's like, well, I never intended it to be enemies to lovers. Everyone just kind of took that and ran with it. So like that's kind of something that made me really think about, you know, these meet cutes going forward. It's like if you don't want people to get confused or like to mislabel it something that it's not, like be really careful in how I have that banter in that first meeting, because I think that meet cute just set everyone up to think it was automatically an enemies to lovers. And like as you know the others have mentioned, like it's really hard to do like in contemporary, like just in general, because if I'm enemies with someone like if I hate someone in real life, like there's just probably no way I'm changing my mind about them. Like no matter how good looking you are, like it's that like that door is closed for me personally. So that would be like really hard, I think, in contemporary if it's actually true hate. So I think like dislike to like is probably more accurate for a lot of these books, and definitely in the case of my book, but it just happens.
As someone who comes from the fanfic world, I've seen a lot of tropes done really well. And yet, it's like 1 out of 50 times I see the amnesia trope done well. And so it is fairly low on my immediate, like, I will read this if it's the amnesia trope. Because it's just so hard to convince me to get behind it. I'm so sorry. I'm sure there are people who have done it wonderfully. I just haven't seen it done well enough for me to like it.
Yeah, I'm definitely echo what everyone is saying. I feel like it's very hard to have like contemporary enemies in contemporary. Um, I I feel like we could just also be like nemesis, you know, like my nemesis. Nemesis to romance or nemesis to lovers. I feel like enemies is so fraught, and like you have to have some really bad history, like not only you as two people, but like your whole community, your family. Like there has to be way more behind you, I feel like, in an enemies that I think is really hard to kind of organically build up in a contemporary setting. Oh,
I
Susan,
will
you
say,
yeah.
sorry. Wait, sorry. I was just gonna say, I feel like with enemies to lovers in contemporary specifically, my thing is like, well, like you said, Lily, it's usually not enemies to lovers. Like usually it's like some kind of, you know, like dislike to like, or even hate to love, or like one-sided, like and like whatever. But I think for me, when I do tend to like it more, is if it's some kind of misunderstanding or something that's put on them by other people, you know, like a family feud type of thing where you really have no say in it, or it's just like, oh, this person ruined our family's life, but really it's like not them, it's like their great 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 grandfather, like whatever, stuff like that, where I'm like, I can get behind that. And enemies to lovers, you know, like they hate each other, but it's like not really because of them. And then they kind of have to like figure it out. I feel like that could work, but as we're supposed to be talking about tropes we hate, so I'm sorry. And yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing, is like I feel like there's like a way to do everything, but yeah, it's just like, what is the way, you know?
I also hate Nazi romances.
Yes, I 100% cannot. Anything and anything like that.
And I think that includes, like, for me at least, it includes fictional allegories for Nazism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like their underlying principle is essentially that their love interest like doesn't have the same human rights. I feel like that's a hard pass, like a red flag, hard pass. I don't know how we'll get over that, you know.
Yeah, like if they're enemies because one of them like has oppressed the other, that's not my favorite. To be very nice about it, but yeah, I agree, Adib.
I think that for me, I don't even know if this is a trope, but I have a really hard time with two characters, and maybe they're not enemies necessarily, and they're not rivals, but like two characters, something really, really big and bad has happened in their past. It's dual perspective, and no one ever thinks about it, right? Like, they interact with each other, you know, now, and they always have these like flashbacks, and they're like, oh, that really big thing happened between us. And like, I never think about it at night when I can't fall asleep, but that really big thing happened and destroyed us. Next chapter. You're just like, what? You like never think about this?
I always assumed there was some sort of like track changes mishap where someone accidentally deleted what the incident was, and no one noticed it because like they had written it, and at a certain point when you're reading your book for like copy edits and past pages, you're like, well, it still looks the same to me. I'm sure it's fine, and then you just didn't realize half a chapter accidentally got deleted. I always assume that's what happened.
I think it's so funny if something like, because that does happen a lot where it's like, oh, like something awful happened between these two characters, and then it's like they have all these interactions without it like coming up really in their brains. And I'm like, I literally stay up at night thinking about how I accidentally like called someone the wrong name, like, or like how I sounded slightly maybe annoyed one day when I was actually not annoyed. I was just overstimulated, and I stay up for days, years at night about this, and they don't think about this thing that is like so relevant to their life. So I'm like in awe. I wish that I had that absence of anxiety.
Yeah, no, I'm like that thing where I by accidentally told someone my grade like 12 years ago. That's what gets me sometimes randomly in the middle of the day. And I'm like, but that thing that destroyed you, you never think about? Like ever?
No.
It never crosses your mind when you see that person again. You never like, I don't know. It could not be me, I guess is my point. I want to end off with another question we got, and that'll be the last one because I think it's interesting. It relates back to what we're saying, but kind of like what would be the hardest trope for you to write? Not because you hate it, just because you're not like sure how to get it right. You're trying to sort of figure out how to work, and it's just not working for some reason.
Heterosexuals.
I am dead. That is amazing. Fair. That's a difficult one.
I mean, I don't think I would get it right. I just won't.
I'm really glad I was muted when you said that because the noise that came out of my mouth. Oh my God, dying.
You're canceled, Adib.
Heterophobic.
Right. Joke's on you. You can't cancel me because I can't read.
Oh my gosh. I have a hard time picking like stuff that I like wouldn't want to try because I do think I would also never write a cis het thing. I don't know. I don't think I could. It wouldn't interest me. But my dog is like making a lot of noise. I'm so sorry. I did let him in. But yeah, I think it would be something like like a telenovela type of trope, like something that I feel like I would want to pull off, but that I don't. It would be so hard to pull off in most books because it would be so campy. You know what I mean? Like I really love camp, so anything super campy, I wanna try, but I'm like scared. So yeah.
Like, I will say, I did not think I was ever going to write a fake dating rom-com just because, like, there are so many wonderful fake dating rom-coms out there. And I was like, am I going to be able to write something that really, like, holds up to, like, the level that all these other, like, really excellent authors are doing? And so I never thought I was going to write that. But then when I got the idea for The Decoy Girlfriend, I was like, it just kind of snapped into place that way. And I was actually really, really concerned because when I started writing my adult novels, I wrote my first YA I published in 2019, and then my next adult novel was in 21. So actually, I kind of like did it side by side. So it wasn't like a conscious thing of, oh, I'm going to move from YA to adult. It was pretty much kind of parallel tracks from the beginning. And at this point, I actually have more adult novels than I do YA. So I didn't think I was going to get like enough adult ideas at the time, because even though it was kind of parallel for me, in the beginning, I was very much thinking of myself as solely a YA author. Like I could not imagine writing anything that wasn't YA. Of course, I was probably like a lot closer to being a YA myself at the time, so that was probably something to do with it. But I think the thing is with like tropes that like you think that you're never going to do or never going to try, whether it just doesn't gel with you, or imposter syndrome, or like whatever. I think for me, it was kind of like a never say never. Like I thought I'm never going to write like a fake dating because I just don't know if I can do it. And then the idea came to me, and I was really worried about, generating enough adult ideas, just because for so long I'd very firmly thought of myself as only YA. And then I got the fake dating idea, and then I was literally trying to think of the pros and cons of, should I do it? Should I not? And then it was literally like, why not take the chance and do it? Like, what do I have to lose? Like the most anyone's going to say is, no, we don't want to buy it. And that didn't happen. Clearly, like people did want to buy it. My editor, my agent, like loved it. So it kind of gave me the confidence to be like, well, kind of examine the reasons why you don't want to do that trope, or why it's not like aligning with who you are as a creator. And I think there's some that I just probably wouldn't do, just because they don't align with like my brand, and what I want to work on going forward. But again, it's like that never say never thing. Like you never know that something might just catch your fancy and you just want to do it.
I don't want to classify it as hardest, because I find like tropes are so fun to me. Just trying to figure out like the basic formulaic parts of it, and then how you make it your own. But I think the one that intimidates me the most is soulmates. I would really want to do it someday, but it intimidates me so much because you have to somehow get yourself and the reader to buy in so much that no matter all these obstacles, all these different odds, that yes, these two people belong together. And I think that's just, after a while, I'm like, you know what? It didn't work after the third try. That it wasn't meant to be. Let it go. Let it go. But there have been some really great soulmates, whether books or media, that I've watched and read, where I'm just like, no, like if by the end you don't make this happen, I will, like, you will be on my shit list for life. I will hate you forever. So, and yeah, soulmates is the one that intimidates me the most.
When I write stories, I don't think of the trope first, actually. I usually have a premise, and then the story falls out from that. So when I wrote The Do-Over, the only message I got from my editor was, oh, I love a fish out of water second chance story. I was like, that's what I wrote. I didn't even know it had words that meant something in a trope world. So it's usually hard for me to answer these types of questions. But I know when I see a list of tropes and I look at a list and I'm like, what do I think of this? I know Secret Baby is one that I would never want to write myself. I can't picture, because most of my characters have a meddling family. So I can't picture anything being hidden from this meddling family in a way that doesn't make the whole thing like a huge comedy, but not turn it into anything romantic, right? It just seems like it would just snowball into something that is not what the purpose of the story is. The thing that I don't think I could write is a monster romance, because I can't picture I would have so much trouble with the anatomy problems that I would get caught up in that in my head. And it would ruin everything about.
That's the best part.
Yes, I would be like, how does this go with this part? And how, I wouldn't be able to do it. I know it slowed me down. So I would never come near that one either. But that's just my personal preference.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for submitting these questions. And also, I want to obviously thank all of the panelists for answering these questions as well. I've put all of the book links in the description box below. So please go check them out and go do everything, add them, read them, like request them at your library. I hope everyone has a really great rest of their day. And yes, thank you everyone also for watching and watching our first panel of the year. So I hope everyone has a really great rest of your romance reading for the rest of the year.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you for having us.